Hey, this is Chris Franco, and you are listening to Compound Money Quietly, the CMQ Investing Podcast. In this episode, you will learn about some of Warren Buffett's biggest mistakes and the lessons that he learned from making those mistakes. Both Charlie and Warren say that studying the mistakes that other people have made and then avoiding those mistakes has been a big part of their success. I was reminded of an exchange from the 2012 Berkshire Hathaway annual meeting. It begins with Charlie Munger, who said, quote, "Warren, I would argue that what you've done, and what I've done to a lesser extent, is to learn a lot from other people's mistakes. That is really a much more pleasant way to learn hard lessons. And we've worked really hard at that over the years, partly because we find it so interesting, the great variety of human mistakes and their causes. And I think this constant study of other people's disasters and other people's errors has helped us enormously. Don't you, Warren?" And Warren Buffett replies,
"Hell yeah!"
In terms of reading of financial history and all that sort of thing, I've always been absolutely absorbed with reading about disasters. And there's no question. There's all kinds of folly, but just the financial area will give you plenty of material if you like to be a follower of folly. And I do think that's what gave us some advantage over these people that have IQs of 180 and can do things with math that we couldn't do. Warren Buffett has not just followed folly. He's actually provided followers of folly with the fodder for their metaphorical firearms.
What? Weirdo.
One of the best examples of this comes from the 1989 letter to Berkshire Hathaway shareholders. Let's go back to 1989. You are listening to WCMQ on your FM dial. The year is 1989, and we are playing the hits. Welcome to the Jungle by Guns N' Roses. If I Could Turn Back Time by Cher. Wild Thing by Tone Loc. Express Yourself by Madonna. Here's a little bit more context about the 1989 letter. Joshua M. Brown from the Reform Broker writes the following. Buffett was commemorating 25 years at the helm of Berkshire, a period during which he'd grown the book value from $19.46 per share to nearly $4,300 per share, a compounded annual rate of 23.8%. Rather than take a much-deserved victory lap on this occasion, the 59-year-old Buffett dedicated his letter on this auspicious anniversary to all of the things that he and Charlie Munger had done wrong. Joshua M. Brown goes on to say the following. It is the late 80s. The bull market is raging, and Buffett has, along with Fidelity's Peter Lynch and the fictional Gordon Gekko, become the human embodiment of America's newfound love affair with the stock market. And now the letter. Warren Buffett writes, quote, "My first mistake, of course, was in buying control of Berkshire. Though I knew its business, textile manufacturing, to be unpromising, I was enticed to buy because the price looked cheap. Stock purchases of that kind had proved reasonably rewarding in my early years, though by the time Berkshire came along in 1965, I was becoming aware that the strategy was not ideal. If you buy a stock at a sufficiently low price, there will usually be some hiccup in the fortunes of the business that gives you a chance to unload at a decent profit, even though the long-term performance of the business may be terrible. I call this the cigar butt approach to investing. A cigar butt found on the street that has only one puff left in it may not offer much of a smoke, but the bargain purchase will make that puff all profit. Unless you are a liquidator, that kind of approach to buying businesses is foolish. First, the original bargain price probably will not turn out to be such a steal after all. In a difficult business, no sooner is one problem solved than another surfaces. Never is there just one cockroach in the kitchen. Second, any initial advantage you secure will be quickly eroded by the low return that the business earns. For example, if you buy a business for $8 million that can be sold or liquidated for $10 million and promptly take either course, you can realize a high return. But the investment will disappoint if the business is sold for $10 million in 10 years and in the interim has annually earned and distributed only a few percent on cost. Time is the friend of the wonderful business, the enemy of the mediocre. You might think this principle is obvious, but I had to learn it the hard way. In fact, I had to learn it several times over.
He's so foolish. I mean, gee, how does Munger put up with him? Yeah.
I could give you other personal examples of bargain purchase folly, but I'm sure you get the picture. It's far better to buy a wonderful business at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price. Charlie understood this early. I was a slow learner. But now, when buying companies or common stocks, we look for first-class businesses accompanied by first-class managements. This leads right into a related lesson. Good jockeys will do well on good horses, but not on broken-down nags. I've said many times that when a management with a reputation for brilliance tackles a business with a reputation for bad economics, it is the reputation of the business that remains intact. A further related lesson. After 25 years of buying and supervising a great variety of businesses, Charlie and I have not learned how to solve difficult business problems. What we have learned is to avoid them. To the extent we have been successful, it is because we concentrated on identifying one-foot hurdles that we could step over, rather than because we acquired any ability to clear 7-footers. The finding may seem unfair, but in both business and investments, it is usually far more profitable to simply stick with the easy and obvious than it is to resolve the difficult. On occasion, tough problems must be tackled, as was the case when we started our Sunday paper in Buffalo. In other instances, a great investment opportunity occurs when a marvelous business encounters a one-time huge but solvable problem, as was the case many years back at both American Express and Geico. Overall, however, we've done better by avoiding dragons than by slaying them. My most surprising discovery: the overwhelming importance in business of an unseen force that we might call the institutional imperative. In business school, I was given no hint of the imperative's existence, and I did not intuitively understand it when I entered the business world. I thought then that decent, intelligent, and experienced managers would automatically make rational business decisions.
False.
But I learned over time that isn't so. Instead, rationality frequently wilts when the institutional imperative comes into play. For example, 1. As if governed by Newton's first law of motion, an institution will resist any change in its current direction. 2. Just as work expands to fill available time, corporate projects or acquisitions will materialize to soak up available funds. 3. Any business craving of the leader, however foolish, will be quickly supported by detailed rate of return and strategic studies prepared by his troops. And 4. The behavior of peer companies, whether they are expanding, acquiring, setting executive compensation, or whatever, will be mindlessly imitated. Institutional dynamics, not finality or stupidity, set businesses on these courses, which are too often misguided. After making some expensive mistakes because I ignored the power of the imperative, I have tried to organize and manage Berkshire in ways that minimize its influence. Furthermore, Charlie and I have attempted to concentrate our investments in companies that appear alert to the problem. After some other mistakes, I learned to go into business only with people whom I like, trust, and admire. As I noted before, this policy of itself will not ensure success. A second-class textile or department store company won't prosper simply because its managers are men that you'd be pleased to see your daughter marry. However, an owner or investor can accomplish wonders if he manages to associate himself with such people in businesses that possess decent economic characteristics. Conversely, we do not wish to join with managers who lack admirable qualities, no matter how attractive the prospects of their business. We've never succeeded in making a good deal with a bad person. Some of my worst mistakes were not publicly visible. These were stock and business purchases whose virtues I understood and yet didn't make. It's no sin to miss a great opportunity outside one's area of competence, but I have passed on a couple of really big purchases that were served up to me on a platter and that I was fully capable of understanding. For Berkshire's shareholders, myself included, the cost of this thumb-sucking has been huge. Our consistently conservative financial policies may appear to have been a mistake, but in my view were not. In retrospect, it is clear that significantly higher, though still conventional, leverage ratios at Berkshire would have produced considerably better returns on equity than the 23.8% we have actually averaged. Even in 1965, perhaps we could have judged there to be 99% probability that higher leverage would lead to nothing but good. Correspondingly, we might have seen only a 1% chance that some shock factor, external or internal, would cause a conventional debt ratio to produce a result falling somewhere between temporary anguish and default. We wouldn't have liked those 99-to-1 odds, and never will. A small chance of distress or disgrace cannot, in our view, be offset by a large chance of extra returns. If your actions are sensible, you are certain to get good results. In most such cases, leverage just moves things along faster. Charlie and I have never been in a big hurry. We enjoy the process far more than the proceeds, though we have learned to live with those also. Okay, so let's review the big mistakes. Let's review how Buffett just blew it.
He blew it.
Number one is being slow to learn the bargain purchase folly. Remember, he says that it's far better to buy a wonderful company at a fair price than a fair company at a wonderful price. And this was a lesson that he says Charlie Munger understood early, whereas he was a, quote, slow learner. After learning this lesson, Buffett says that now, quote, when buying companies or common stocks, we look for first-class businesses accompanied by first-class managements. No longer are they looking at mediocre businesses just because they can get it for a bargain. The next mistake is trying to solve complex business problems. And I like this quote a lot. In both business and investments, it's usually far more profitable to simply stick with the easy and obvious than it is to resolve the difficult. The next mistake is ignoring the institutional imperative, and more specifically, the influence of the institutional imperative. Buffett wrote that his most surprising discovery was the overwhelming importance in business of an unseen force that we might call the institutional imperative. And we can think of this as just a tendency to mindlessly imitate your competition. And how did Warren Buffett learn from this mistake? What did he do differently moving forward? He mentions that they organize and manage Berkshire so that they minimize the influence of the institutional imperative. He also says that him and Charlie concentrate their investments on companies that are alert to this institutional imperative problem. The next mistake is doing business with bad people. I don't have specific examples, but I think the lesson here is key, and that is, quote, we've never succeeded in making a good deal with a bad person. The final mistake is one we can call the error of omission. And Buffett said, quote, it's no sin to miss a great opportunity outside one's area of competence, but I have passed on a couple of really big purchases that were served up to me on a platter and that I was fully capable of understanding. Several months ago, I posted the following Charlie Munger quote to our Instagram account, Charlie Munger Quotes. It goes like this. It's a good habit to trumpet your failures and be quiet about your successes. What I'm going to read to you next is the caption that I included when I posted that quote. I asked, why is this a good habit? In other words, why is this a good habit to trumpet your failures and be quiet about your successes? For one, overconfidence. Overconfidence is a cognitive bias that causes us to make miscalibrations of subjective probabilities. It also causes us to overestimate our own abilities. For example, despite the evidence that the vast majority of professional investors cannot outperform the S&P 500 index over the long term, there are countless amateur investors or retail investors, individual investors, who still think they can do it, or think that they have a higher than average chance of doing it. That's overconfidence bias working its magic. The academic research on overconfidence bias, as it relates to investing, provides us with a lot more to think about. The most cited study that I read, which has nearly 4,000 citations, notes that, and I quote, overconfidence can explain high trading levels and the resulting poor performance of individual investors. Our central message is that trading is hazardous to your wealth. In another study, which has nearly 800 citations, the authors found that, and I quote, investors who think that they are above average in terms of investment skills or past performance trade more. And last but not least, humility is a virtue. It's better to eat your own humble pie than to have life serve it to you when you least expect it. It may also help you compound money at a higher rate and make a lot more money over your lifetime as an investor. That's why I think it's a good habit to trumpet your failures and be quiet about your successes, for those reasons that I just mentioned. Reminding yourself of just how stupid you've been, even if you don't do it publicly like Warren Buffett does, it's a useful activity. I'd highly recommend staring in the mirror and telling yourself, self, I suck. Don't do that. But what you should do is consider this quote from Charlie Munger. The best thing a human being can do is help another human being know more. If you learned something valuable in this episode, please share it with a friend. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify, subscribe so you never miss an episode. Just hit that subscribe button, as all the YouTubers like to say. Smash that like button. There's no like button to smash, but what you can do is leave a 5-star review with a couple of sentences about what you liked. That goes a long way on Apple. It helps more people discover CMQ investing. I also just love reading what you like because it tells me what I should do more of. Subscribe to our email newsletter for free at cmqinvesting.com. Our email subscribers receive the posts about these episodes, and those include the links to anything we read or talked about. If you'd like to get in touch with me directly, I love hearing from you. Email franco@cmqinvesting.com. That's FRANCO. You can also follow me on Twitter @ChrisFranco. Follow @CharlieMungerQuotes on Instagram. Tell yourself how great you are, because you are, and try to learn the hard lessons about investing vicariously rather than making those mistakes yourself. It'll save you a lot of pain, save you a lot of heartache, and save you a lot of money. That's all for now. My name is Chris Franco. This is Compound Money Quietly, the CMQ Investing Podcast. Thank you, as always, for listening and supporting. We'll talk soon.